The rain had been falling all morning, soft but relentless, coating the streets in a slick, reflective sheen. I pulled my coat tighter around me as I stepped out of my apartment, the collar brushing my neck, and tried not to shiver. There's a certain quiet that comes with a city washed in grey light, the world muted. The usual chaos softened into distant sounds of car tires swishing through puddles, umbrellas snapping open, and the faint hum of neon from a cafe down the block. I always loved mornings like this. They gave me time to think, to breathe, to remind myself that life, even ordinary life, could feel cinematic if you let it. Today, I had a flight to catch a business trip I didn't particularly want to take. As I walked, my heels tapping steadily against the wet pavement, my thoughts drifted to him. It had been 5 years since Michael died. 5 years since the car accident that tore him from my life and left me hollow in a way I hadn't thought possible. 5 years of grief, of rebuilding, of pretending that the world had moved on when secretly I hadn't allowed myself to. A gust of wind lifted my hair and brought with it the sharp tang of ozone, the way it smells just before a storm really hits. Something about it made me pause, my senses prickling. I glanced around the nearly empty street. Nothing. Just the rain, the streetlights, and the occasional puddle reflecting my own worried expression back at me. I shook my head, forcing a laugh I didn't feel. "You're being ridiculous," I whispered to myself. "It's just rain." Still, the feeling lingered, a subtle, almost imperceptible sense that someone was watching. I quickened my pace. The airport was a 10-minute walk from my apartment, and I tried to focus on mundane things. The sound of my umbrella scraping against the rail of the pedestrian bridge, the way my suitcase wheels splashed through shallow puddles, the rhythm of my own heartbeat. The airport lobby was crowded with travelers, their faces a blur as they checked phones, sipped coffee, or ushered children past security lines. I scanned the terminal absently, making a mental note of the gate number. That's when I noticed it. A shadow dot. It was subtle, just at the edge of my vision. Something or someone moved behind the glass doors of the lounge across from my gate. I blinked, certain it was just a trick of light, the reflection of a passerby. But the shadow lingered, shifting slightly, as if it were observing me. Deliberate, patient. I shook my head again. "Stop it. You're imagining things," I muttered. Yet, I couldn't deny the chill that ran down my spine. I found my seat by the window and tried to distract myself with my phone. Emails, news alerts, meaningless scrolling, anything to anchor me to the ordinary. But the moment I leaned back, the strange unease returned, subtle and insistent. The shadow had followed me, or perhaps I had simply noticed it again. I wasn't sure which was worse. Closing my eyes for a brief moment, I remembered the dream I had last night. It was vivid, unlike any dream I'd had in years. Michael was there, his eyes dark and unreadable, staring at me from a misty forest. His mouth moved, but I couldn't hear the words. The air was heavy with rain, the scent of wet leaves and pine needles filling my nose. And then he was gone, swallowed by shadows that moved like living things. I shivered. It was just a dream, I told myself. 5 years was a long time. Memories fade. Pain dulls. But why, then, did the feeling of being watched follow me like a shadow that wouldn't leave? The boarding announcement pulled me back to reality. I'd packed my phone and walked toward the gate, trying to focus on the practical. Tickets, passport, seat number. But as I approached, I froze. He was there. At first, I thought my eyes were deceiving me. The man walking past the crowd, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with a quiet confidence. It couldn't be him. It had to be someone who just resembled Michael, a stranger in a cruel coincidence. But then our eyes met. It was him. Not a look-alike. Not a stranger. Not a trick of light. Michael, alive, standing there as though 5 years hadn't passed, as though death had never touched him. And yet, there was something different. The air around him shimmered subtly, like heat rising from pavement on a summer day, though the terminal was cool. Shadows seemed to cling a little too closely to him, bending, stretching unnaturally. My chest tightened. This wasn't just a man, it was something more. Something alive in ways I couldn't explain. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. I wanted to convince myself it was impossible. And yet, I was rooted to the spot, unable to look away. He smiled, then a slow, knowing smile that sent a thrill and a chill racing through me. For a moment, time seemed to stop, the hum of the airport fading into silence, the crowd around us blurring into nothing. And then he turned away, glancing toward the gate. His movements were too fluid, too precise, almost predatory in their grace. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. I followed, unsure why, driven by curiosity, by fear, by a bond I couldn't name. Every step brought me closer to a truth. I didn't yet understand a truth that would shatter the ordinary world I had clung to for 5 long years. And as I approached, the shadow flickered again, this time clearer, sharper, as though it had taken a form all its own behind him. My breath caught. The world had just shifted, and I had no idea how far it would pull me into darkness, into mystery, and into a love that might defy death itself. The moment I stepped onto the plane, I thought the chaos of the airport would absorb my panic, that the hum of passengers and the clatter of luggage would be enough to anchor me back in reality. But it wasn't. Not even close. I found my seat by the window and tried to act normal, though my hands trembled slightly as I buckled my seatbelt. Michael, or whoever, or whatever he was, had disappeared into the crowd before I could speak to him. My rational mind told me he had simply boarded another flight, that my imagination was running wild. But a part of me refused to believe that. My chest still ached with the memory of his eyes, those impossible, alive, haunting eyes. As the plane taxied down the runway, I tried to settle into the safety of normalcy. Headphones on, phone in hand, mind busy with emails. Yet even amid the white noise of flight attendants' announcements and the soft hum of engines, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was. Often it started subtly. At first, I thought it was just fatigue or stress. The man across the aisle shifted in his seat, yet when I looked, he hadn't moved. A flicker of shadow in the corner of my vision seemed to slink along the overhead beams, disappearing whenever I tried to focus. I chalked it up to airplane lighting and an overactive imagination. But then came the whispers. Not loud, not words I could understand, but soft, urgent, like air brushing past the edge of my ear. I jerked my head to the side, scanning the cabin. The rows of passengers were filled with ordinary travelers, eyes glued to screens or reading material. No one else seemed aware. I swallowed hard. My pulse accelerated, and for a moment, I questioned my own sanity. "Okay," I whispered under my breath. "It's just nerves. It's just nerves." Yet the whispers persisted, subtle but insistent, threading through the engine's hum. And then a shadow moved again, this time across the aisle, not vanishing when I looked directly. I caught a glimpse of him. Tall, broad, just standing there, watching me. My stomach lurched. Not Michael. Not exactly. The features were familiar, too familiar, but distorted, like the reflection in a rippling pond. The hair, the jawline, the eyes, all vaguely reminiscent. But not him. And yet my heart twisted at the recognition. A magnetic pull I couldn't explain. I tried to refocus on the mundane, the safety instructions, the blanket, the tablet screen in front of me. But my mind kept circling back, spinning between memory and reality, past and present. Something in the air had shifted. I could feel it, a weight, a tension, as if the plane itself were carrying more than passengers and luggage. Something unseen hummed around us, brushing against my senses in a way that made my skin prickle. Then came the first direct warning. Flight attendant approached with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She leaned down, voice too soft to be heard by anyone else. "Be careful who you trust," she said, and moved on without explanation. I stared after her, heart hammering. Words like that on an airplane, ordinary and benign in most contexts, suddenly carried the weight of omen. I wasn't sure whether to be frightened or incredulous. Part of me wanted to dismiss it as coincidence. Another part recognized the tone, the subtle urgency, the hint of fear behind her perfect smile. The plane leveled off and I thought, maybe this was it. Maybe the turbulence, the whispered words, the shadows, they were all tricks of my mind. I closed my eyes briefly, willing myself to breathe normally. And then I heard it. The softest sound, almost like breathing, yet not my own. I opened my eyes quickly. Across the cabin, empty seats flickered with movement, shadows bending and stretching against the fluorescent lights. My pulse raced. It wasn't fear in the ordinary sense, it was anticipation, like the air itself was charged with something waiting to happen. Then came the encounter I couldn't explain. The stranger, the one who reminded me of Michael, sat down across the aisle. Not directly in my line of sight, just close enough that I could feel his presence. He didn't speak, didn't smile, but there was intent in the way he angled his body, the subtle energy radiating from him. My rational mind screamed at me, "Do not engage." But another part, a part that had been dormant for 5 long years, reached out instinctively, seeking what it recognized, whether dangerous or not. I tried to focus on the window, the grey clouds rushing past. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside me. I could feel his gaze even without looking. There was knowledge there, memories shared, regrets unspoken. And yet, there was something more, something primal, something alive, that didn't belong to the human world. My hands gripped the armrest, and I felt a tingle under my skin. A warning, almost. A pulse of energy that seemed to originate from him, passing invisibly through the cabin, threading through the air, touching me. The whispering returned, faint, urgent. "Be ready. Be aware." I didn't know if it was a premonition or a hallucination, but my instincts screamed at me that I wasn't safe, at least, not entirely. Not in the ordinary sense. Every clatter of the tray tables, every murmur of the passengers, seemed to hold double meaning, double significance. Every small, normal action felt fragile, like glass ready to shatter under the slightest pressure. Then, a sudden vibration ran through the plane, light but noticeable. Not turbulence, I realized it was him. Or rather, the presence he carried. I could feel it through the soles of my shoes, in the air brushing my skin. It was a warning I didn't understand, a signal I wasn't prepared to interpret. I glanced toward him again, and he met my eyes. Just for a moment, long enough for my heart to skip a beat. There was no smile, no recognition, only the shadow of a secret, a warning, and a question that needed answering. And then he was gone. Not physically. I could see his form in the aisle, but the energy around him dissipated, leaving a hollow, unsettling void. The whispers stopped, the shadows flattened, the hum of the plane returned to ordinary levels. Yet I knew it wasn't ordinary. I would never see ordinary the same way again. My breath came fast, my hands sweaty. I gripped my seat and stared out the window at the swirling grey clouds, feeling as though the world itself had tilted just slightly. Something had shifted. Something was coming, and I was at the center of it. Whether I wanted to be or not. As I closed my eyes, trying to make sense of it all, the faintest shadow flickered across the wall near the exit doors, slipping behind a curtain. Too deliberate to be accidental. My pulse thumped in my ears. The plane, the people, the mundane world I had known, they were fragile. And the danger, though unseen, was already whispering my name. The cabin lights dimmed as the plane cruised above a grey, endless ocean of clouds, and I kept my eyes fixed on the window, pretending the storm outside and the storm inside me were separate. But I knew they weren't. I could feel it, the tension, the pull, the invisible thread tying me to him. I hadn't looked directly at him yet. Not since that first fleeting moment when I had glimpsed the shadow in the terminal. The impossibility of Michael standing there alive and breathing. I had tried to convince myself it was a trick of the mind, a cruel twist of memory and longing. But the instinct in me, the same instinct that had kept me alive when grief threatened to swallow me, refused to lie. He was here. Somehow he had returned. Somehow he was real. Then I noticed him across the aisle. Not moving in the ordinary way a passenger does, no shuffling papers, no checking a screen. He sat perfectly still, the faintest smile tugging at his lips, eyes fixed somewhere beyond the cabin, but somehow impossibly aware of me. A jolt ran through me. My breath caught. I couldn't explain why, but my stomach twisted with anticipation. There was danger in him. Yes, but danger with a magnetic pull, a force that made every nerve in my body flare. I forced myself to glance at him more fully, just long enough to take in the details. The sharp planes of his face were familiar, yet altered. The darkness in his eyes wasn't sorrow or anger, it was something else. Something primal. Shadows seemed to cling around him as if the light itself hesitated near his form. His posture was relaxed, but it radiated a predatory energy, a quiet command of the space around him. I wanted to look away. I needed to. Every rational part of my mind screamed that this was impossible, that I was imagining it, that to engage him was to invite trouble. Yet I couldn't move. Not my eyes, not my heart. Something about him demanded attention, demanded recognition, demanded surrender in the smallest sense. Then he shifted. Not physically in a noticeable way, but subtly. The air seemed to ripple. The temperature in my row dipped imperceptibly. My hair stood on end, not from fear, but from awareness. He knew I was watching him. He felt me watching. And then, impossibly, he smiled. This time fully, deliberately, as though he remembered everything he had ever loved about me, and everything I had tried to bury in grief. My throat went dry. My hands clenched the armrests as a swirl of emotion hit me. Longing, confusion, pain, and an undeniable spark that I hadn't felt in years. I wanted to speak, to call his name, to ask questions I already feared the answers to. At the moment I opened my mouth, he leaned slightly forward, his gaze piercing mine, and my words vanished. Silence fell between us, louder than any voice could have been. "You're real," I whispered finally, my voice so soft I doubted even I could hear it. He tilted his head slightly, as if amused by my astonishment. "I never left," he said, voice low, calm, and perfectly controlled. Each syllable sent a shiver down my spine. Not completely. My heart raced. That phrase, simple, ordinary words, carried an extraordinary weight. The weight of 5 years of loss, of unanswered questions, of nights spent wondering if love could endure death itself. And now it was here, tangible, impossible. And sitting across from me in the cabin, I wanted to study him, to see any sign of human weakness, but there was none. He radiated strength power that didn't feel purely physical, but deeper, older, as if his existence brushed against a world I couldn't see. And beneath it all, a vulnerability that reminded me of the man I had once known and loved. The plane rattled slightly, and instinctively, he reached out, but not to me. A hand hovered over the space beside him, brushing an invisible thread, and I realized the subtle shift in the air wasn't turbulence. It was him. The energy surrounding him bent the space around us. I swallowed hard, the reality of it pressing against my chest. He wasn't human. Not entirely. Not anymore. And yet, he was still Michael. My Michael. I tried to pull away, to anchor myself in reason, but the pull was irresistible. My mind raced. What happened to him? Why was he here? How had he returned? And more importantly, why did it feel as though he had been waiting for this moment as much as I had, whether consciously or not? The whispers began again, faint at first, almost like echoes bouncing along the cabin walls. I shivered and glanced around. Passengers busied themselves with magazines, phones, blankets. No one else seemed to notice. The sound or warning was only for me. Only for us. He watched me through the corner of his eyes, calm, composed, almost teasing. The magnetic energy between us grew heavier, pulling me forward even as I tried to resist. There was danger here, yes, subtle but undeniable. Forbidden's danger, the kind that made my pulse quicken and my skin tingle. And yet, there was safety too, a strange reassurance that I could feel in his presence. My mind wandered to the last time I had felt this way. Years ago, when love had been simple, human, and heartbreakingly possible. This was different, charged, impossible, supernatural. And yet, I couldn't look away. He leaned slightly closer again, and I felt the air itself bend between us. Not a touch, not a word, just presence. And it was enough to leave me trembling, aware of every heartbeat, every breath, every fleeting thought. The plane seemed smaller, quieter, as if the world outside had slipped away, leaving only us and the unspoken tension threading through the cabin. I wanted to ask the questions that burned in my mind, but fear held me back. Questions about death, about the supernatural, about how someone could return from beyond. Fear of the answers. Fear of the attraction that felt both wrong and inevitable. And fear, most of all, that 5 years of grief might have only been the beginning of a story I was only now stepping into. The turbulence of the clouds mirrored the turbulence in my chest. My hand trembled as I gripped my seatbelt. I wanted to look away, to be normal, to retreat into safety. But the pull was stronger than fear, stronger than reason. And when his eyes met mine again, deep, unreadable, magnetic, I realized that nothing in my ordinary world could ever prepare me for what was coming next. And I didn't want to run. Not entirely. When the plane landed, I thought the ordeal might end. But once I touched the familiar asphalt of the airport, surrounded by fluorescent lights, luggage carts, and mundane announcements, I could reclaim the normalcy I had spent 5 years trying to rebuild. But reality, I realized quickly, had shifted. As I walked down the jet bridge, suitcase rolling behind me, I felt it again. The pull. That quiet, insistent tug that had been threading through the plane all morning. I told myself it was just nerves, that I was imagining Michael's impossible return. And yet, every instinct in my body screamed that the line between ordinary life and something else, something ancient, something alive, was already blurred. The taxi ride from the airport should have been ordinary. Traffic, honking horns, the dull rumble of the city beneath the tires. But even here, the world felt fragile. Streetlights flickered for no reason, casting long shadows that twisted unnaturally on the sidewalks. A man crossing the road glanced at me, then froze mid-step, eyes widening in a way that was entirely too familiar, almost as if he had recognized me, or something near me, before disappearing into the crowd. I shook my head. Stop reading into everything. This is normal. People are just people. But the thought offered little comfort. When I reached my hotel, I found my room just as I had left it months ago, the city's hum muffled behind closed windows. I tried to unpack, to ground myself in ordinary tasks clothes in drawers. Suitcase tucked in the corner, laptop open to check work emails, but the moment my fingers touched the keyboard, a cold draft washed over me. Not the ordinary kind, not a draft from an air vent. This was deliberate, as if the room itself were breathing, and it carried with it the faintest scent of cedar and pine, the smell Michael always wore. I froze, my hand hovering over the keys. Not possible, I whispered to myself. Then the lights flickered, briefly plunging the room into shadow. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw a figure move past the window. Too tall, too fluid to belong to any ordinary person. When I blinked, it was gone. I sat down heavily on the bed, trying to tell myself it was exhaustion. But deep down, I knew exhaustion didn't make the air throng with invisible energy, didn't make shadows linger too long, didn't make whispers curl around the edges of my awareness. And I knew that the world I had built in the years after his death was already fragile, a thin veneer over something much darker and far more alive. That evening I went for a walk. The city at night had always been familiar to me. The gentle glow of streetlights, the distant buzz of neon signs, the rhythm of footsteps on wet sidewalks. But tonight, everything felt off. The familiar streets twisted subtly, corners seeming sharper, alleyways stretching longer than memory allowed. I shook my head. Stop it. You're imagining things. And yet the coincidences piled up. A cat darted from the shadows, only for its eyes to reflect something unearthly, glowing faintly in the dark. A billboard flickered, and for a moment I thought I saw a figure resembling Michael in the advertisement. Then it blinked away, gone in a flash of light. Even the street signs seemed wrong, their letters slightly distorted, almost as if they were trying to communicate something. I turned down an empty side street, drawn by a strange, almost magnetic pull, and felt the air thicken. Shadows moved in ways they shouldn't, elongating and bending around invisible shapes. A sudden gust of wind carried a whisper in my ear. Not words I could understand, just a sound, urgent, insistent, warning me. My heart pounded. I wanted to run, to escape the growing sense that I was being drawn into something I didn't yet understand. And yet, I couldn't stop. Every step forward was compelled by curiosity, by the invisible thread connecting me to him. The supernatural, I realized, was no longer distant or abstract. It was here, tangible, and impossible to ignore. Then came the first real sign of danger. A car screeched around a corner too quickly, tires skidding on wet asphalt. Normally, I would have stepped back instinctively, but something froze me in place. A shadow crossing in front of the headlights that shouldn't have been there. The car slowed, swerved, and stopped abruptly, but the air around me vibrated with tension, as if the world itself had held its breath. From the shadow, a shape emerged. Not human, but not entirely beast. Its eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the dim light. It paused, studied me, and then retreated silently into the darkness, leaving me shaking, breathless, and acutely aware that whatever was out there, it was watching, and ordinary me was already in its sights. I stumbled back to the hotel, heart racing, aware that my life had fractured into two worlds, the one I knew, and the one waiting just beyond the veil. The ordinary had cracked. The supernatural had seeped in. That night I barely slept. Every creak in the room, every draft brushing the window pane felt like a message. Every shadow seemed alive. Alive in ways I had only glimpsed in dreams. And yet, despite the fear, there was a strange thrill, a pulse that whispered of connection, of inevitability, of a bond that would not be denied. I remembered Michael, the way he had moved on the plane, the pull of his presence, the energy that bent reality subtly around him. And I understood then that I could not resist. The ordinary world I had tried to cling to, my job, my routines, my carefully reconstructed life, was no longer safe. Not for me, not as long as he existed, as long as whatever he had become lingered in the shadows of my life. By the time dawn crept through the hotel curtains, the world outside looked ordinary again. The streets were bustling, taxis honking, neon lights flickering, the hum of the city ordinary and familiar. But inside me, the world had shifted irrevocably. I had crossed the threshold. The supernatural was no longer a distant possibility. It was here, and there would be no turning back. The next morning, I walked through the quiet streets, my mind restless, replaying every impossible detail from the plane and the night before. My rational self wanted to dismiss it, to call it coincidence, exhaustion, or grief playing cruel tricks. But another part of me, the part I had tried to bury, knew it was something else. Something alive. Something real. I didn't know why I found myself standing in front of the cafe near the hotel. It was the kind of place I had walked past 100 times, unremarkable except for its warm light spilling onto the sidewalk. And then I saw him, Michael, or whatever he had become. He was sitting at a corner table, hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee, the morning sunlight brushing across his face. His presence drew every detail in sharp focus. The way his dark hair caught the light, the subtle set of his jaw, the calm intensity in his eyes that seemed to see through me, past all the walls I had built. I froze. He looked up. Our eyes met, and for a heartbeat, nothing else existed. No cafe, no traffic, no city noise, only the pull between us. I didn't think you'd come, he said softly, voice low but unmistakably real. I don't know why I did, I admitted, voice barely above a whisper. I just had to see you. To know, my words faltered. Knowing what? That he was alive. That the impossible had become reality. That the bond we shared, however fractured by death, was still here, unbroken. He gestured to the chair across from him. Sit, he said. No command, no pressure, just an invitation. But the magnetism of it pulled me forward as if my own will were only partially my own. As I sat, a silence fell over us, not uncomfortable but charged. Every small movement, every glance, felt heavy with meaning. I noticed the subtle details. The way his fingers drummed lightly on the cup, the faint line of tension along his shoulders, the way he watched me without needing to speak. It was as if he could read everything I was thinking and feeling, but he didn't pry. He just knew. I don't understand, I said finally. How are you here? You, my voice caught. You were gone. He tilted his head, and a shadow passed over his expression. Regret, sorrow, and something else. Something darker. I was pulled back, he said carefully. I didn't choose it, but I am here now, and I need you to know. I never stopped caring. Not once. The words pierced me, reopening old wounds I thought had healed. I wanted to protest, to remind him of the years of grief, the nights spent wondering if I would ever love again. But the pull in my chest, the warmth in my hands, the flutter in my stomach, it was undeniable. He was here, alive, and more than alive, something changed. Something stronger, something I couldn't yet name. I sipped my coffee nervously, trying to ground myself. Why now? Why here? He leaned closer, just slightly, and I felt a subtle shift in the air. Not frightening, but impossible to ignore. Because we're tied, he said softly. More than you know, more than the world allows. Fate doesn't always ask permission. I swallowed. The words felt dangerous, forbidden even, and yet there was a comfort to them, a reassurance that despite all the impossibilities, we were connected. And for the first time in years, I felt the stirrings of hope. For the next hour, we talked quietly, cautiously. Nothing overtly romantic, nothing inappropriate, just conversation that carried layers of emotion beneath the surface. He asked about my life, my work, my routines, and I found myself answering truthfully, surprised at how easy it was to fall into old rhythms. In return, he shared fragments of his experience vague enough to intrigue, but too mysterious to fully understand. The hints of danger, of supernatural reality, hovered at the edges of every sentence. At one point, he reached across the table just lightly, his fingers brushing mine, and the shock of it made my stomach lurch. Not fear, not alarm, but a recognition, a spark of memory and longing and desire all at once. I didn't pull away, even though a part of me screamed that this was wrong, that it was too soon, that the world had rules I was forgetting. I missed this, he admitted quietly. I missed us, even knowing I couldn't have it before. I never stopped feeling it. I wanted to reply, but words failed me. Instead, I simply nodded, letting the silence carry meaning. A moment stretched between us, delicate and fragile, yet powerful in ways neither of us could fully explain. Then, as the sunlight shifted across the cafe, something happened that stole my breath. His form flickered, just for an instant, a subtle ripple, almost like a shadow bending unnaturally, then gone. I blinked, certain I had imagined it, but the sensation lingered, a shiver down my spine. The pull in the air intensified, almost palpable, and then I noticed the faint glow in his eyes, the way the light seemed to bend around him, just at the edges, like the world itself hesitated in his presence. I gasped softly. Michael! He smiled, but there was no warmth in it this time, only a knowing intensity. There are things I haven't told you, he said, voice low, careful. Things you're not ready to understand, but soon, you will see. I felt a mixture of awe and fear. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to retreat into the ordinary, safe world I had clung to for years. And yet, another instinct, one I hadn't felt in a long time, urged me forward, closer, to trust, to believe, to risk. Even sitting across from him, in a sunlit cafe filled with ordinary noise and ordinary people, the supernatural pressed in. Shadows seemed darker near him, edges sharper, and I knew, with a certainty that made my chest tighten, that nothing about this meeting was accidental, that he was no longer just the man I loved. He was something else entirely, something powerful, something dangerous. And yet, I wanted him. I wanted him in a way that was terrifyingly simple. Not passion or lust. Those were the things I had left behind. But connection, understanding, and the bond that had survived death itself. The moment passed, replaced by the mundane, the clatter of a coffee cup, the chatter of a waitress. But I couldn't forget what I had seen, what I had felt. Something about him was changing the air around us, bending it, bending reality. And I realized with a shock that whatever he had become, whatever supernatural force he carried. It was no longer something I could ignore. The pull was real. The bond was real. And the truth, whatever it was closer than I had imagined. The next few days were a blur of normal routines and impossible coincidences. I returned to work, answered emails, attended meetings, but nothing felt ordinary anymore. Every shadow seemed to twitch just slightly when I passed. Every reflection in a window or mirror felt wrong, distorted. And through it all, the pull toward him remained, invisible yet insistent. Like gravity, I couldn't resist. I didn't see him every moment, but I felt him. At the cafe, in the streets. Sometimes in the corner of my vision, a shadow would move too deliberately, a presence too precise to be human. I tried to dismiss it, to tell myself I was imagining things. But the pull in my chest, the almost magnetic awareness of his proximity, refused to lie. Then it happened. I was walking home late one evening, the city quiet and slick with rain, when I noticed him standing across the street. He wasn't approaching. He didn't call out. He just was, motionless, like a statue in the misty glow of the streetlights. And yet, I could feel him. Every nerve in my body recognized him instantly. I crossed the street, drawn forward despite the rational part of me screaming to stop. As I got closer, the air seemed to shift, carrying with it a subtle scent: earth, wet stone, and something wild, untamed, like the forest after a storm. My pulse quickened. "Michael," I whispered, my voice trembling slightly. "What are you?" He didn't answer immediately. He tilted his head, shadows bending subtly around him. And for a moment, he looked different, stronger, faster, more alive than any human should be. And yet the eyes, the same eyes I had loved, held the same depth, the same familiarity. And not entirely. "As you remember," he said finally, voice low and steady, "I'm something else now. Something I can't fully control yet." I took a step back instinctively. Fear lanced through me. The world he existed in wasn't the ordinary one I had clung to. Something supernatural radiated from him in every movement, every subtle shift of air around him. But beneath that fear, fascination bloomed, an impossible, magnetic fascination I couldn't escape. "What? What do you mean? What are you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, though my hands shook. His gaze softened slightly, but the shadows clung tighter around him. "I'm a shifter," he said finally. "Part of a world you've never known. Part of a fate that doesn't let me be just human. Part of me is something primal." I swallowed hard, the words sending shivers down my spine. Shifter. Werewolf. Cursed soul. I had read about these things in myths, in stories, but never in reality. Never for him. He stepped closer, but cautiously, giving me room. "I didn't come back to hurt you. I came back because I couldn't stay away. But there's danger here, and you need to understand." I wanted to argue, to reject the impossible truth, to tell myself it wasn't real. But the air around him throbbed with something I could feel in my bones. The ordinary world had cracked, and the supernatural was bleeding through every seam. Then, in a motion too fast for my eyes, he vanished from the sidewalk and reappeared a few steps away, as if he had walked through shadows rather than the space between. My heart raced. "You can't," I began, voice cracking, but he held up a hand, calm and steady. "I know," he said softly. "I know it's frightening. I don't fully understand it myself. But it's who I am now. And it's why I can't leave you. Why I shouldn't, even if it's dangerous." Fear, fascination, and mistrust churned inside me. Could I trust him? Could I accept the truth without losing myself to the impossible world he represented? And yet, I couldn't turn away. Not entirely. Not ever. We stayed there on the sidewalk for what felt like hours. The rain falling softly, the city around us oblivious. And with every word, every glance, every subtle motion, I felt the bond between us strengthen, even as doubt gnawed at me. Then, just as I began to imagine I could accept it, I saw something that froze me. Across the street, in the reflection of a shop window, I glimpsed a darker side of him, one I hadn't been prepared to see. His shadow stretched unnaturally, moving independently of his body. The glow in his eyes deepened briefly, sharp and fierce, like a predator aware of its prey. I gasped, stumbling backward slightly. Michael, or the creature he had become, turned toward the reflection, his expression calm again, almost apologetic. But I couldn't shake the image. The shadow had betrayed him, or perhaps revealed a side of him he hadn't intended me to see. My heart pounded. Conflicting emotions tore at me. Fascination, fear, longing, and doubt collided in a storm I couldn't control. I wanted to believe him, to trust the bond we shared, to hold on to the man I had loved. But the shadow, the power, the unnatural movement, it hinted at danger I didn't fully understand. I began, unsure what to say. Words felt insufficient, meaningless in the face of what I had just witnessed. He stepped closer again, this time more slowly, deliberately, and reached out, not touching me, but brushing the air near my hand. "I didn't mean for you to see that," he said quietly. "It's part of me I can't hide. Part of me I'm still learning to control." I wanted to recoil, to run, to insist this was too much. And yet, the pull in my chest remained, magnetic and unyielding. I couldn't leave him. "Not really. Michael," I said finally, voice trembling. "I don't know if I can handle this. I don't know if I can trust you or even myself." His expression softened, and the shadows seemed to retreat slightly, though the tension remained. "I understand," he said, "and I won't force you. But I also won't leave. Not now. Not ever. You're part of this, whether you want to be or not." I wanted to argue, to deny the bond, to retreat into ordinary safety. But even as I tried, the evidence of his truth, his unnatural presence, his power, the shadow moving in ways it shouldn't remained undeniable. And in that moment, a new emotion rose, sharper and more dangerous than any fear I had felt before. Doubt. Was he truly the man I loved? Or had death and whatever had changed him created something I couldn't recognize? Could I trust his heart when so much of him now belonged to a world I didn't understand? I looked at him, standing in the rain, shadows clinging, eyes glowing faintly, and realized the supernatural was no longer a secret. It was a reality I had to face. And whether I wanted to or not, the bond we shared would pull me in deeper. But I wasn't sure if it would save me or betray me. Days passed, and the world felt simultaneously heavier and brighter. Michael was impossible to ignore. Every glance, every subtle gesture between us seemed to ripple with meaning. Even in the midst of my ordinary routines, work, errands, quiet evenings in my apartment, the pull of him was constant, insistent, magnetic. I wanted to deny it, to cling to the life I had rebuilt over 5 years. But it was useless. He had returned, alive, transformed, and nothing could erase the bond that had survived death. And yet, as our connection deepened, I began to notice the first signs of danger. It started with small things. Shadows that moved when no one else was around. Whispers in crowded streets. Eyes that lingered too long on me. Strangers who seemed to know too much. At first, I told myself it was paranoia, that the world was merely odd and coincidental. But Michael's subtle glances, the tension in his stance, suggested otherwise. He knew. He was aware of it all, and he wasn't surprised. One evening he invited me to meet him in the park. The sun was setting and golden light filtered through the trees, long shadows stretching across the paths. It should have been ordinary, peaceful even, but I sensed the undercurrent of unease the moment I arrived. "Do you feel it too?" I asked, walking toward him. My voice was quiet, tentative. He nodded, expression grave. "Yes, my past? It's catching up, and it's not human." "What do you mean?" I asked. Heart-pounding. He gestured to a small clearing, and we walked there together. The air was alive with tension, subtle and electric, almost like the forest itself was aware of us. Before I disappeared, there were others. Rivals. Hunters of my kind. They didn't stop when I left. And now, they're aware you're involved. That's why you've noticed the attention. I froze. Involved? I don't understand. Why would anyone care about me? He looked at me, intensity in his eyes. Because of the bond. Because of destiny. You're tied to me, whether you realize it or not. And they know it. I've tried to protect you, to stay away, but now that I'm here, I can't hide either. They're watching. My stomach twisted. The ordinary world I had tried so hard to hold on to was gone. Even the streets I walked every day were no longer safe. And yet, despite fear, I felt a thrill. Part of me, the part that had never fully let go of love, was drawn to him, drawn to the danger, drawn to the unknown. "Why didn't you tell me before?" I asked. "Because I couldn't," he said simply. "I had to be sure you'd survive the truth. And now, there's no turning back." We stood in silence for a moment, the park around us quiet except for the occasional rustle of leaves. Then he reached out, lightly, gently, and brushed his fingers against mine. It wasn't a touch of passion or desire, but it carried weight, connection, reassurance. My chest tightened. I wanted to pull away, to retreat into safety, but the bond was stronger than fear. Stronger than reason. Suddenly, a noise came from the trees. A low, guttural growl, barely audible yet unmistakable. My pulse leapt. Shadows shifted at the edges of my vision. I looked at Michael, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of tension in his eyes. "They're here," he whispered. I wanted to panic, to run, but he held out a hand. "Stay calm. You're safe with me. For now." A figure emerged from the shadows, a silhouette tall and imposing, with eyes glinting faintly in the fading light. My first instinct was to run, to hide. But Michael stepped forward, his presence radiating a quiet command. The stranger paused, hesitation in their stance, before retreating silently into the trees. What are they?" I asked, voice shaking. "Hunters. Rivals of my kind," he said. "They've been looking for me for years. And now they've found you. You're part of the danger just by being near me." I took a step back, suddenly aware of the magnitude of what I had stepped into. The ordinary life I had cherished. The routines that had kept me grounded, all of it was gone. I was entangled in a world of shadows, of supernatural forces I didn't fully understand. And yet, the thought of leaving him, of stepping away from the bond that had survived death itself, felt impossible. For hours, we walked together through the park, talking in whispers, keeping to the shadows. He explained fragments of his past rival shifters, threats from creatures that existed beyond the human world, and the lengths he had gone to survive and protect me. Every detail deepened my fascination, even as it stoked fear. The man I loved, the bond we shared, was more complex, more dangerous, more extraordinary than I could have imagined. By the time we parted that night, I was exhausted, trembling, yet exhilarated. I knew the ordinary world was gone. I knew that danger lurked close, unseen but ever present. And I knew the pull toward him, toward this impossible bond, was stronger than anything I had ever experienced. As I walked back to my apartment, I realized I faced a choice. I could try to retreat, to pull back into the ordinary, safe world I had fought to maintain. Or I could surrender, step fully into the unknown, accept the bond, the danger, and the destiny that tied me to him. And then, just as I reached my door, my phone buzzed with a message I didn't recognize. The sender was anonymous. The words were short, sharp, and chilling. "You're next. And he won't be able to save you." I froze, my hands trembling around the handle. The ordinary world had vanished completely. Danger was here. The supernatural was real. And the bond I couldn't deny had just become a choice I might not survive. I sank to the floor, heart pounding, staring at the message. The shadows in my apartment seemed darker now, stretching toward me, as if the world itself had shifted, aware of the threat. And I realized the truth I had been avoiding. I could no longer retreat. I could no longer deny him, or the destiny that had drawn us together. But could I trust him fully? Could I step into the unknown without fear of betrayal? Or was this bond, powerful and magnetic as it was, also the most dangerous thing I had ever embraced? The answer hovered just beyond reach, as fleeting and fragile as the shadows in the corners of the room. And I knew one thing for certain. Whatever choice I made, my life and my heart would never be the same. I had thought the danger came from the outside, from rivals, from Michael's world, from the shadows that seemed to follow me. But that night, as the moon rose high over the city, I learned that the danger and the power had been inside me all along. It started with a letter, sealed in black wax, left under my apartment door. No note, no signature, only a small emblem embossed on the envelope. A crescent moon intertwined with a wolf's paw. My pulse raced as I unfolded the parchment inside. The words were strange, formal, and yet strangely familiar. "You are of the line of the Larkins. The blood of shifters runs through your veins. What you have always called intuition, dreams, and whispers is inheritance. Your fate is bound to the one who returns, the one who has awakened you. Beware, for the bond is both a gift and a curse. What you see now is only the beginning." I sank onto the edge of my bed, heart hammering. Shifters, bloodlines, fate. It sounded impossible, but every thread of instinct, every echo of dreams I had dismissed as imagination, suddenly made sense. Strange visions as a child, a deep connection to animals, dreams of shadows and forests, of voices calling to me across impossible distances. They weren't dreams at all. They were inheritance. A knock at my door startled me. I almost didn't recognize Michael standing there, silhouetted against the hall light, the familiar calm in his posture, yet shadows moving subtly around him. "You've found it," he said softly, stepping inside without waiting for permission. The truth. I clutched the letter in trembling hands. I don't understand. My family, my bloodline. This was never mentioned. None of it. Why? Michael's expression was unreadable for a moment, then softened. Because the knowledge is dangerous. Your family protected you by hiding it. The bond, the gift, the blood, it can't be awakened safely until the right time. Until it finds you. I shook my head. The right time? But why now? Why me? Because of me, he said quietly, stepping closer. I've returned, and the bond has pulled you in. It's not just your bloodline, it's fate. And now, your past and mine are entwined in ways neither of us can ignore. I struggled to absorb it. Fate. Bloodline. Bond. A cursed inheritance. The whispers, the shadows, the strange pull toward Michael, it wasn't coincidence. It had been written in the very fabric of my life long before I met him, long before I grieved him, long before I imagined I could live an ordinary life. Your ancestors were guardians, he continued, voice low, compelling. They walked between worlds, between human and shifter, between the ordinary and the supernatural. They protected those like me, kept the balance. And now, that responsibility falls to you, whether you want it or not. I sank back against the wall, mind spinning. Everything I thought I knew about myself, about my life, about who I was, it was suddenly rewritten. My ordinary life, my safe routines, even my grief, had been framed by a hidden world I had never known. I don't know if I can do this, I admitted, voice trembling. I don't know if I can accept everything. The bond, the destiny, all of it. I'm just me. I'm human, or at least I thought I was. He knelt beside me, placing a hand lightly on my arm. You're more than you realize. You always have been. And that's why you survived what you thought was impossible. Why you were able to endure loss and still move forward. You are stronger than you know. And the bond isn't just about me. It's about you too. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to embrace the revelation, the sense of purpose, the connection to a world I had only glimpsed in fleeting visions. But fear lingered, gnawing at the edges of my resolve. My heart ached with the weight of possibility and danger. What if I couldn't control it? What if the bond didn't protect me, but led me into peril? Then Michael hesitated. His expression shifted, a shadow passing over his face. There's something else, he said. Something I didn't know until recently. Something you need to see for yourself. Before I could respond, he held out his hand, and the room seemed to warp slightly. Shadows stretching as if they were alive. A faint glow emanated from him, illuminating the walls. I gasped, stepping back, but curiosity overpowered fear. A mirror in the corner reflected not just my image, but another layer beneath it. I watched, frozen, as the reflection shifted, my eyes glowing faintly, veins illuminated with a subtle silver light. The shadows behind me pulsed and moved, forming shapes that were not entirely human. I stumbled backward, heart racing, feeling as though I was staring at a self I had never known. You see? Michael whispered. The blood calls to the supernatural. It has always been a part of you. The inheritance awakens now, because we cannot fight destiny forever. I shook my head, trying to process the impossible. This can't be real. I'm me. I'm just me. He took a step closer, voice soft but insistent. You are yourself, but yourself is more than you think. The world we live in, my world, your bloodline, the bond, it's all connected. And there's someone out there who knows about it. Someone who won't stop until they claim what they think belongs to them. I swallowed hard, fear rising alongside fascination. Every instinct screamed that my life had changed irrevocably. The ordinary world I had clung to had been replaced with shadows, powers, and truths I couldn't ignore. And Michael, my impossible, magnetic Michael, was at the center of it all. Then, just as I began to accept the revelation, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. A faint shadow flickered across the mirror, a silhouette that looked like Michael, but not him. It moved independently, lingering behind my reflection before vanishing. My heart leapt. Was it an echo? A rival? Or a fragment of the supernatural power Michael carried? Something even he hadn't told me. I turned to him, panic rising. What is that? He hesitated, expression unreadable. It's complicated. Something from my past. Something tied to your bloodline. I didn't know it would appear now. I thought I could control it. And in that moment, I realized the truth. The bond, the inheritance, the destiny. It wasn't just about love or connection. It was about power, danger, and secrets that even Michael couldn't fully contain. I sank to the floor, trembling, as the weight of revelation pressed down on me. My past, my bloodline, my bond, it had all led to this impossible moment. And yet, one question burned in my mind. If I truly embraced this destiny, if I stepped fully into the supernatural world, would I recognize myself? Or would I become someone I didn't know? The answer hovered just beyond reach, as fragile and fleeting as the shadows in the corners of my room. And I knew one thing with certainty: my life and my identity would never be the same again. The revelation of my bloodline weighed on me, like a stone I could neither lift nor ignore. Every corner of my apartment seemed smaller, every shadow longer. The ordinary world I had clung to for so long no longer existed. Even breathing felt different, as though my lungs had to adjust to the knowledge that the supernatural was no longer fiction. It was my reality. And Michael, he was at the center of it. That evening he appeared at my door without knocking. As if drawn by the same bond I felt pulsing in my veins. His eyes met mine, calm yet intense, and I realized just how deeply intertwined our fates had become. The pull between us, already impossible to ignore, had grown stronger, urgent, and suffused with a quiet tension that neither of us could name. "I can feel it too," he said softly, stepping inside. "They're closer now. The hunters. The rivals. And someone else. Someone from my past I thought was gone forever." I swallowed, suddenly aware of the fragility of safety. "What do you mean? Who?" He hesitated, voice low. "I don't know. But I can feel them watching, waiting. They're testing the bond. Testing us." I nodded, heart racing. "Then we have to be careful." "Yes," he agreed. "But careful doesn't mean we hide. Not anymore. Not after everything." For hours we sat together, planning, strategizing, trying to anticipate threats I didn't fully understand. Yet even as fear pressed in, the bond between us deepened. Every subtle glance, every touch light, almost accidental, yet impossible to ignore, pulled us closer. It was a quiet, emotional intimacy, a connection that went beyond words. I wanted to trust him fully, but a small part of me, the part that had survived grief, loss, and impossibility hesitated. And then came the first real test. The next morning, as I walked to the market, I noticed shadows that lingered too long. People who shouldn't have been looking at me were staring. I felt a presence following me, moving with me, close but unseen. My pulse quickened. Then I heard it. A low, melodic whisper, almost like a voice carried on the wind, threading through the city streets. It said my name, clearly, intimately, and sent a shiver down my spine. I spun, but no one was there. The streets were crowded, but no face belonged to the voice. I felt fear rise, tempered by fascination. This was the supernatural, tangible, undeniable. And I knew Michael would sense it too. When I returned home, he was waiting, seated in the quiet of the apartment. "I felt it," he said immediately, voice calm. "Someone's trying to lure you, test your connection to me, to your bloodline." I sank into the chair, exhausted. "Why now? Why us?" "Because destiny isn't patient," he said softly. "And our bond, it threatens those who think they control the shadows." I wanted to ask who exactly was behind it, but a chill ran through me as I noticed the shadows shifting unnaturally in the corners of the room. I blinked, and they recoiled, just slightly, as though aware I had seen them. "I can protect you," he said, rising to stand beside me. "But I need to know. Will you trust me? Fully?" even when it's frightening. I hesitated. The rational part of me wanted to pull away, to retreat into safety, to pretend this wasn't happening. But the pull between us was undeniable, as if my very soul responded to his presence. I want to, I said finally. I want to trust you. But I'm afraid. That's natural, he said gently. Fear doesn't break the bond. Doubt does. Don't let it. That night, sleep was impossible. Shadows seemed to linger closer. The wind whispered strange words against the window. And every time I closed my eyes, I saw flickers of shapes creatures that didn't belong to the human world. Testing the bond. Testing me. Then came the moment that changed everything. I had been standing by the window, watching the city lights shimmer on wet streets, when a flicker of movement caught my eye. Across the road, someone or something was watching the apartment. Its shape was tall, unnervingly still, with eyes that glowed faintly in the darkness. I gasped, and then I felt it Michael behind me, hand on my shoulder, calm and grounding. They found us, he said quietly. Who are they? I whispered, fear and fascination twisting together. Rivals, he said. Hunters of my kind. Shadows who can move between worlds. They want the bond. They want you, and soon, they might test me, test us in ways we can't predict. I shivered, aware that danger was no longer abstract. It was here, tangible, immediate. And yet, despite the fear, I couldn't pull away. Not fully. Not when the bond pulsed between us, powerful and insistent. And then, just as my heart began to settle, Michael's expression shifted. A flicker of unease crossed his face, shadows bending differently around him. There's someone else, he murmured, voice tight. A past I thought I had left behind. They've arrived, and I don't know if I can protect you completely. My stomach dropped. Someone else, here. He nodded slowly, eyes darkening. I need to tell you something. Something I didn't want you to see yet. But it's time. Before I could ask, a sharp sound echoed outside like claws scraping on metal, and the shadows in the room quivered. Michael stepped closer, protective, but I felt a new emotion rising in my chest. Doubt. Could I trust him fully? Could I step into this supernatural world without losing myself? Could I survive the bond and the danger that now defined my life? And then the moment shattered completely. From the hallway outside, a voice called my name. Not Michael's, not human. Low, melodic, familiar in a way that sent chills racing down my spine. You belong to us. I froze. The pull between fear and fascination, trust and doubt surged within me. Michael's hand tightened around mine. Stay close, he whispered. I did. But in that moment I realized the impossible truth. The bond, the bloodline, the destiny, they were no longer just ours to navigate. Outside forces, shadows from Michael's past, and my own untapped power were converging, and I had to choose step fully into this supernatural world with him, risking everything, or pull away and try to reclaim a safety that no longer existed. I didn't know which path to take, but I did know one thing. Whatever happened next would change us forever. The city felt alive that night, though alive in a way that made every instinct in me scream. Shadows twisted in the alleyways. The wind carried strange whispers, and every step I took seemed measured, anticipated. Michael had insisted we leave the apartment, to stay ahead of the unseen hunters and rivals that now sought me. That leaving meant stepping fully into the supernatural world, the one I had only glimpsed through dreams, shadows, and fragments of his past. I clutched my coat tighter, heart hammering. Are you sure this is safe? I asked. Michael glanced at me, eyes dark and intense. the shadows around him twisting slightly. Safe is relative. Nothing about us has ever been safe. But staying still, that's far more dangerous. I wanted to pull away. Part of me wanted to retreat, to turn back to the ordinary life I had fought to maintain, the life before Michael returned, before shadows became real. But the pull between us, the bond, was impossible to deny. Every fibre of me responded to him, even as the rational side of my mind screamed caution. We moved through the city streets, shadows stretching like fingers across the pavement, until we reached the abandoned warehouse Michael had identified as a probable location for the hunter's surveillance. He pushed open the rusted door, stepping inside first. I hesitated at the threshold, then followed, trusting him even as doubt gnawed at the edges of my resolve. Inside, the air was heavy, thick with tension, the smell of damp metal and dust clinging to everything. Shadows moved in ways that felt almost alive. And then I saw them, figures cloaked in black, their eyes faintly glowing, moving silently like predators. "They're expecting us," Michael whispered, his hand brushing mine briefly. The touch was grounding, and yet the shadows seemed to recoil from it. I swallowed hard. "What do we do?" "Face them," he said simply. "There's no running now." My heart raced. Facing them meant stepping fully into this world, accepting that the supernatural was real, and that I was no longer ordinary. I glanced at Michael, and for the first time, I noticed something I hadn't before: a flicker of darkness behind his calm. A shadow in his expression that hinted at power I didn't fully understand. A side of him both protective and dangerous. The figures advanced silently, circling us, testing boundaries, waiting for a misstep. Michael's stance shifted subtly, shadows twisting around him like a cloak. "Stay close," he said, voice low. "Don't let them separate us." I nodded, gripping his hand tightly, feeling the pulse of the bomb thrumming between us. Fear and fascination collided inside me. I wanted to trust him completely, but the shadow I had glimpsed before, the one flickering in mirrors, moving independently, lingered in my mind. Suddenly, one of the figures lunged, faster than humanly possible. Michael stepped forward, shadow bending around him, and intercepted with a motion too quick to follow. The air shimmered as if reality itself bent slightly under his presence. My breath caught. "Michael," I whispered, awe and fear warring in my chest. He didn't answer immediately. His eyes met mine briefly, intense and serious, then back to the threat. In that moment, I saw the darker side of him, the part shaped by survival, by power I hadn't fully known. It was frightening, magnetic, undeniable. He was no longer just the man I had loved. He was something more, something dangerous, and yet my heart refused to turn away. The figures backed off slightly, reassessing, and Michael exhaled. "They won't take you," he said. "Not while I'm here. That I need you to trust me completely." "Can you do that?" I hesitated, heart pounding. The rational side of me wanted to pull back, to deny the bond, to retreat into safety. But every instinct screamed that safety no longer existed. The supernatural had claimed me. The bond had claimed me. And Michael, dangerous, dark, magnetic Michael, had claimed me. "Yes," I whispered finally. "I trust you." He gave a brief, sharp nod, shadows bending closer to him. "Good. Then we fight together." The air around us shimmered, the figures pausing, then advancing again. Michael moved with an elegance and speed that defied human comprehension. Shadows followed him, responding to his presence, while I remained close, feeling the pulse of the bond guide me, steadying my fear. Then one of the figures broke formation, moving directly toward me. My instincts screamed to step back, but before I could, Michael's shadow surged forward, forming a protective barrier that rippled outward like liquid darkness. The figure stumbled, then froze, seemingly repelled by something beyond ordinary comprehension. My chest heaved. What are you doing?" I whispered. "I'm keeping you safe," he said, voice low, almost rough with intensity. "But I can't do it alone forever. You have power to bloodline, inheritance. You need to embrace it now, or we'll lose this advantage." I swallowed hard, fear and doubt threatening to overwhelm me. To embrace it meant stepping fully into the supernatural, accepting that my life as I knew it was gone. It meant trusting Michael completely, even as his darker side, his power, loomed in ways I didn't fully understand. And then came the final test. One of the hunters, or perhaps rivals from Michael's past, broke free from the shadows and lunged directly at him. The force of it was unnatural, and I felt my heart leap. Michael's shadow bent, surged, and then faltered, just for a moment, but long enough to see the human vulnerability in him, to see the possibility of loss. "No," I cried, stepping forward instinctively, feeling the bond pulse through me, guiding my movements. The shadows around me reacted to my presence, responding in subtle ways I hadn't controlled before. I realized with a shock that the inheritance, the bloodline, wasn't dormant. It was awake, and I could influence it, even in small ways, even in fear. But before I could act fully, the figure blocked my path, a glint of eyes and teeth, something primal, otherworldly. Michael stepped back, watching me, eyes wide with both warning and something else, hope. "Trust. You have to choose," he said urgently. "Step fully into this, or pull back. But no, there's no returning to the old world. No denial. Only acceptance or loss." My heart raced, mind spinning. Safety or love? Truth or denial? Power or retreat? Every instinct screamed a different answer. And then, a sudden surge of motion. Michael moved to intercept the figure again, shadow bending around him, but the figure vanished into the darkness. A cold wind swept the warehouse, carrying whispers and threats that were impossible to place. I was alone for a heartbeat. Heart pounding, chest tight, shadows pressing closer. And then I felt it, the bond, powerful and insistent, pulling me toward Michael, toward the unknown, toward destiny. But outside the shadows, a new figure emerged. Taller, darker, and unmistakably not human. A rival from Michael's past, drawn by our bond, standing between us, blocking the way. I froze. Michael's hand reached for mine, but the distance between us seemed to stretch impossibly. The shadows around him flickered, reacting to the stranger. And in that heartbeat, I understood the truth. Our connection, our bond, our love, it was under threat in ways neither of us had faced before. I had to choose. Step forward and embrace the supernatural fully, risking everything including myself to stay with him. Or pull back, deny the bond, and retreat to safety I knew no longer existed. And before I could decide, the rival moved closer, a low, resonant hum vibrating through the air, as if the shadows themselves were aware of our hesitation. I clenched my fists, heart hammering, and realized, whatever choice I made, nothing would ever be the same. The world had shifted, the bond had deepened, and the shadows waited for our next move. The warehouse was alive with tension, every shadow seemingly shifting of its own accord. I could feel the bond pulsing between Michael and me, stronger than ever, urging me to act, to step forward, to embrace the destiny I had feared for so long. But fear still clung to me, cold and insistent, whispering that the price of choice might be too high. The rival from Michael's past, the one whose presence had shattered the fragile calm we had clung to stood before us. Tall, imposing, and unnatural, they radiated a quiet, calculating menace. Their eyes glinted in the dim light, reflecting a knowledge of shadows I had never encountered. Michael stepped forward, his shadow bending around him like liquid night. But he paused, looking at me, his expression a mix of warning and trust. "This is the moment," he said quietly. "You can't hide. I can't protect you fully if you hesitate. You have to embrace it. You have to embrace yourself." I swallowed hard, heart pounding. I could feel the inheritance inside me, the bloodline, the gift, the power I had always denied. And I realized, with a jolt of certainty, that I couldn't run. I couldn't pull back. The bond, the destiny, the love we shared, it demanded courage, demanded choice, demanded action. I stepped forward, not as I did. The rival's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of recognition passing across their face. Michael moved closer, shadows shifting around him, protective and fierce. And then I felt it, something deep, ancient, and alive within me, responding to the threat, responding to Michael, responding to the bond that had survived death itself. The rival lunged, and instinct took over. Shadows bent, reacting to the pulse of my inheritance. I didn't think, I simply moved, guided by intuition and the bond. The rival staggered, not from harm, but from the sheer force of presence, the invisible pull of power we wielded together. Michael's voice reached me, calm and urgent. "Now, focus on the bond, on us, on what makes us strong." I did. I felt the pulse of our connection resonate through me, a steady, rhythmic thrum that expanded outward, enveloping the shadows around us. The rival faltered, caught in the resonance, unable to advance further. The tension in the air was electric, yet not violent, forceful, yes, but controlled, guided by the bond and the inheritance. And then came the moment I understood fully. This was not about destroying an enemy. It was about claiming power we had always possessed, about defining the boundaries of our bond, about standing together in the face of fear. I focused. I drew the energy inward, letting it flow through me, through Michael, through the connection that had been our lifeline. The rival recoiled, a shiver running through their form. And then, as if acknowledging defeat in a quiet, almost imperceptible way, they retreated into the shadows. I sank to my knees, chest heaving, the adrenaline of fear and triumph coursing through me. Michael knelt beside me, shadow folding back to reveal him fully. He placed a hand on my shoulder, warm, grounding, reassuring. "You did it," he whispered, voice low, almost incredulous. "You embraced it. You embraced yourself." Tears threatened in my eyes. Not just relief, but something deeper, pride, awe, and an understanding that I had crossed a threshold I never thought possible. I had faced the unknown, the supernatural, the threat that loomed over us. And I had survived. And not just survived, I had acted. I had chosen courage over fear, bond over safety. Michael helped me to my feet, and we stood together in the quiet aftermath. The shadows of the warehouse were calm now, lingering but no longer hostile. Outside, the first hints of dawn touched the sky, a soft, golden light spilling over the city. I was scared, I admitted quietly, but I didn't run. I didn't pull back. He smiled, a slow, almost tender curve of his lips. "And that's why you're stronger than you realize. That's why the bond works. We are stronger together, stronger than any shadow, stronger than fear itself." I felt it, the bond pulsing with clarity and purpose. It was no longer just a connection. It was a force, a definition of who we were and who we could be. It was love, yes, but also trust, courage, and shared destiny. And yet, Even in victory, there was an awareness of cost. The rival had retreated. Yes, but they had not disappeared. Others would come. Shadows from Michael's past, remnants of the supernatural forces that shaped his life, would test us again. And I understood fully that life would never be ordinary again. But for the first time, I felt ready. Ready to face it. Ready to embrace the inheritance. Ready to stand beside Michael, not as a frightened human, but as a partner, a guardian of the bond, a force in my own right. We stepped out of the warehouse. Together, the early morning light softening the harsh lines of the city. Michael's hand found mine, and I held it firmly. Heart steady. The danger had not vanished, but the fear had transformed. It was no longer paralysis. It was determination, courage, and certainty that we could face whatever came next. And then, just as we reached the street, a new presence made itself known. Shadows twisted along the edges of buildings, coalescing into shapes I had never seen. Figures tall, imposing, their eyes reflecting a strange, otherworldly light. Michael's grip tightened on my hand. "They've found us," he said, voice low. "And they've brought something different. Something more dangerous than before." I looked at him, heart pounding, and understood fully. The climax was not just over. It had shifted, evolved. We had faced our greatest fear, but the consequences, the fallout, were only beginning. I took a deep breath, feeling the bond pulse stronger than ever, and whispered, "Then we face it together." Michael nodded, shadows swirling around him, protective yet ominous. And as the new figures advanced, I realized that this was only the beginning of the next chapter. The battle was won, but the war, the journey, and the destiny that bound us were far from over. The city held its breath with us, the shadows watching, waiting, as dawn illuminated the possibility and the danger of what lay ahead. The city was quiet in the early morning, a soft hush settling over streets that had, only hours ago, been the stage of shadows and threats. The tension that had gripped me for weeks, no, months was easing, replaced by a cautious calm. Michael and I walked side by side, hands brushing, fingers occasionally entwining. The bond pulsed between us, steady now, a heartbeat of connection I could feel as clearly as my own. We had survived. Against rivals, shadows, and the weight of destiny, we had endured. Yet, surviving was not the same as returning to the ordinary world. That world no longer existed for me, or perhaps, I no longer belonged there. The inheritance, the bloodline, the bond, all demanded recognition, and I had embraced it. We paused at the edge of the park, the soft golden light of dawn spilling over the trees. I took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill my lungs. For the first time in weeks, I felt clarity. The shadows, the whispers, the danger, they had shaped me. Yes, but they had also revealed the strength I never knew I had. Michael watched me, a quiet intensity in his eyes. "You've grown," he said softly. "Even through fear, through uncertainty, through everything, they didn't break you. You embraced it. Embraced yourself. And us." I smiled faintly, warmth rising in my chest. "I was afraid," I admitted. "Of losing myself, of losing you, of everything. But I also realized that fear doesn't have to control us. It doesn't define us. Courage does. Love does. And so does trust." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my face. A gentle gesture that carried years of unspoken connection, longing, and the unshakable certainty that we had found each other again. "You've always had that courage," he said. "It was just waiting to be claimed." The truth of it settled in me. The woman who had mourned him, who had walked through life believing he was gone, was no longer the same. The inheritance had awakened more than supernatural abilities. It had awakened clarity, resilience, and a profound understanding of my own worth. I had survived fear and shadows, yes, but more importantly, I had survived myself. We sat on a nearby bench, hands finely entwined, the bond between us calm yet vibrant. "I've lost so much," I said quietly, reflecting on the life I had once known, my ordinary days, my illusions of safety, the version of me who never imagined supernatural shadows. And yet, I've gained something I never expected. You. Us. Something real. Something unbreakable. Michael nodded, his thumb brushing over the back of my hand. "And I've lost and gained too. I returned to find you, to reconnect, but I also found a new life, a new part of myself. The shadows, the power, even the danger. It's all different now because we faced it together. You've changed me, more than anything else ever could." A soft breeze stirred the park, carrying with it the scent of early morning grass and the distant city. It was ordinary in its way, yet infused with meaning. We were no longer ordinary people in an ordinary world. We were bonded by bloodline, destiny, and choice survivors of trials, protectors of a fragile harmony between worlds. I was terrified of the bond at first, I admitted. I thought it might consume me, control me. But it hasn't. It's made me stronger, more, myself. And it brought us here, together in a way I never thought possible. He smiled, leaning closer, his forehead resting lightly against mine. And it will continue to guide us. The bond is part of us. Yes, but it doesn't control us. It shows us what we are capable of, together and individually. That's the gift. That's the strength. For a long moment we simply sat, the city around us awakening, unaware of the battles we had faced, the shadows we had overcome. I realized with a sense of awe that life had shifted. Not all danger was gone, not all mystery resolved, but we had reached a moment of peace, a calm after the storm. And that peace, fragile as it might be, was ours. "I think I finally understand," I whispered. "Love isn't just comfort. It's courage. It's facing fear and shadows and choosing each other anyway." Michael's grip tightened just slightly, a silent affirmation. "Exactly. And you've done that more than once. That's why we're here now." A soft, melodic hum drifted through the park, the subtle echo of lingering shadows. Harmless now, no longer threatening. I realized that even the supernatural world we had glimpsed, fought against, and embraced, had changed. It had responded to courage, to choice, to love, and perhaps, in some small way, it had been waiting for us to claim it responsibly, together. I looked at Michael, truly saw him, not the shadows, not the danger, not the magnetic allure of his power, but the man who had returned, who had faced his own past and fears, who had fought to protect me, and who had allowed me to fight alongside him. My heart swelled with gratitude, love, and an unshakable certainty. "We've lost things," I said softly, "but we've gained more than I ever could have imagined. A bond, yes, but also trust, courage, and hope." Michael nodded, eyes softening. "And that's enough to face whatever comes next. Together." I leaned my head against his shoulder, feeling the pulse of the bond, the steady rhythm of connection, and the quiet satisfaction of victory tempered by understanding. The shadows of the past no longer loomed as threats. They were markers of what we had overcome, and reminders of the strength we carried forward. For the first time since his return, I smiled fully, without fear, without hesitation. I had faced loss, danger, fear, and the impossible. And in the end, I had found love, courage, and the extraordinary within myself. The city stretched before us, bathed in morning light. Shadows lingered only in memory, the supernatural world waiting quietly, respectfully, at the edges of our lives. We had survived the trials, embraced the bond, and emerged stronger, forever changed but together. I turned to Michael, a quiet smile playing on my lips. "So, what now?" He smiled back, a mixture of mischief and tenderness. Now we live, fully, fearlessly, together. Whatever comes next, we face it side by side." And in that moment, I knew it was true. We had survived the impossible, faced our fears, embraced destiny, and claimed the bond that had guided us through shadows and danger. We had lost, we had gained, and above all, we had found each other again. The world was vast, unpredictable, and sometimes dark. But in Michael's presence, with the bond between us steady and alive, I felt ready to face anything. The past, the inheritance, the shadows, they had shaped me, but they no longer controlled me. Together, we stepped forward, hands entwined, hearts aligned, and spirits unbroken, ready to meet the future, whatever it held, with courage, love, and unshakable trust. And as the sun rose over the city, spilling warmth across the streets, I understood something deeply, profoundly. Sometimes, the greatest magic isn't in powers or bonds or destiny. It's in surviving fear, embracing love, and discovering the extraordinary within ourselves.